All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the WordPress Meetup. We meet here at Chief every third Tuesday of the month. So welcome if you haven't been here before, and welcome back if you have. Can I see hands for people who are new tonight? Awesome. So welcome. Great to have you. We meet, like I said, here regularly every third Tuesday. Thank you to Chief for the food and the wine and the beer and the space. My name is Beth. I'm one of the people who helps organize the meetup, along with Casey, who's over here with the camera, and Courtney, who's in the back, and Russell, who's in the back, and Tracy, who's somewhere back there, and Anthony, who's right here, and some other people who are not here. But welcome. Next month, we are going to do some lightning talks. Lightning talks are really short, 5 to 7 minute talks, and they are awesome talks to have as your first talk. So if you are interested in giving one of those lightning talks next month, please find one of those people I just named, or raise your hand right now, and we will find you, and we can get you set up for next month, because we want to have 5 or 6 folks.
Tara's first talk was a lightning talk, right?
Yes, Tara's first talk was a lightning talk.
Yeah.
It's going to be about 5 minutes. Any topic that seems like something that would be useful for the people here, so it doesn't have to always be specifically WordPress, but it could be user experiences or how you learn to do something, and it's a really great way to think.
Yes. Speaking of, Tara, who is speaking tonight on membership sites, gave her first talk as a lightning talk at the meetup 6 months ago, something like that. Whenever we last did lightning talks. Tara is the founder, lead person of Design TLC, which is a web design and marketing company that she runs herself, and the co-founder of Nice Work LLC with Evelyn, who's right over here. I have known Tara for a while now, and she also participates in the WordPress training team and goes to a lot of exotic places to go to WordPress events, which I'm always jealous about. So most recently, Florida. So welcome, Tara, and I'm gonna throw it over to her.
Can everybody use this? Yeah, this works. All right, cool. Somebody told me not to stand behind the podium, so we're going to give this a shot. Hi, everybody. As Beth said, I'm Tara, and I basically make really nice WordPress websites for our clients, and I do them with TLC. So when I was in middle school, and this is actually me, yes, I know. I won't tell you what year it was, but when I was in middle school, I went through a phase where I formed clubs with my girlfriends on a fairly regular basis. Most notably was the Charlie's Angels Club. Of course, I was Kate, the smart and not glamorous Charlie's Angel. But we had all kinds of rules. We had a secret handshake, a secret password. We collected, I think, a nickel dues every week, and we had a little notebook we kept in my friend Julie's backyard shed. So this was a really fun club. It made us feel cool and important. But it was also, as I look back, my first experience with membership. Now, if you think about it, you probably can think about things that you belong to as kids: Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, sports teams, right? Everybody's belonged to something. It's really what our culture is made of, is belonging to things, being members, being part of an association. It's what makes up our community, our identity. So we're all really familiar with the concept of membership in general. It's part of our daily life. Now with the internet, it's really part of our daily life, and we probably don't even think about it as membership most of the time, but every time that you interact with a website and you have to log in with a username and a password, you're essentially interacting with a membership. If you run a WordPress website, if you manage a WordPress website and you have a username and a password, you might not think of that as a membership, but you are actually a member of that site. Amazon, you can have a membership just by purchasing something, or you can purchase a recurring membership with them and have your Prime membership and get all kinds of benefits. So these are just, we don't even think about it, right? I mean, how many of you logged into one of these websites today? Yeah, we all do it. We don't think about it. You don't even think about it. Sometimes it probably you log in automatically. It's a process you don't think of, right? But when it comes to being a web designer, a web creator, we have to think about it. We have to think about it from both ends. We have to recall what it was like to be a member and to join a club, to join a membership. Also, we have to think about what we want it to be like for people who are coming to our website.
It only has like a 3-foot range.
This is a process. This is a process, and that's what I'm going to talk a lot about. I'm going to talk about plugins, which is part of the WordPress membership world. But first, before you even get into plugins, you really have to think through the process of a membership website. For non-members, for members, logged in, logged out, these are all steps in a process. I have this up here not to overwhelm you. This is available on the slides that I'll have afterward and also on my website. I've written a couple of blog posts about membership websites. But this is just to kind of show you the kind of flow that you think through when you're setting up or planning to set up a membership website. And the first step is, do you really need a plugin? As I said, a WordPress website just on its own really is a membership website. Let's say you have a couple of pages of static content that you want to protect from the world, but a couple of board members or something you want to be able to access it. Well, you could just password protect that page and give them the password. It's the least secure, it's the least sophisticated, but you might not need a full-on membership website. So that's the first question. Most likely, you will choose to have a membership website though. So again, we're going to talk a lot about the process, logging in, logging out, and joining. When you think about experiences that you've had joining, can anybody think of a time when they were not able to log into a website? Have you all had that happen? Okay. So when that happens, what's the process like? Is it easy to retrieve your password? These are things that we have to think about on the back end because it's something that we have to pay attention to and test. What's the messaging like when people come to join your website or to log into your website and they're not a member? What's that process like? Again, here we have the opportunity, if we are not a member already, to sign up. But is that really as obvious as you want it to be if you're trying to sell something? A lot of membership plugins give you the opportunity to have different membership levels, and some don't. You might choose to have different payment levels. You may choose to have expiration dates on your membership and people have to renew, or it may go away. These are all things to think about. Also, can your members belong to more than one membership level at a time? That's something that many plugins don't allow you to do. Managing your members. I've had a few membership websites where my client has some customers who are not very tech savvy, right? Do you have any customers who aren't tech savvy? Any users of your website who aren't tech savvy? So we have to prepare for those people, right? Somebody who doesn't really want to put their credit card on a website. Somebody who doesn't, who isn't comfortable with that process of joining. So would your client on their own, with their level of tech savviness, be able to add a member on their own or to change their membership of various members? How easy is that to do? And then the WordPress admin bar, you know, where it says howdy up at the top. Do you want your members to be able to see that? Because WordPress by default, anyone who's logged into your site has some kind of an admin bar at the top that you may want to hide. Some membership plugins offer you the opportunity to do that within the plugin, and others you'd have to add another plugin on top of that to hide it or do some custom coding. So probably the main reason why you have a membership site is to protect your content. What type of content is that? Are you offering downloads to people? Are you selling a product? Is it just static content on your page? And is it some of the content on your site or all of it? Most likely it's not all of it because you'd like to have something public facing where people have the opportunity to join. And what do non-members see? This is a big sticking point for me is, and you'll hear me say it a couple of times, but when somebody comes to your website to log in and they're not a member, if membership is open, it's not always obvious how they can join. So if they get to a page that's protected and it says, you're not a member, you're not going to incentivize them to join if there's no link there to join. So you have to think all of these scenarios through. And then finally, drip content. Does anybody know what drip content is? Yeah, what is drip content?
Content that's on a schedule after they sign up.
Right. So it means that maybe you're doing a course or there's some kind of process or timeline that you want people to receive your content. So some membership plugins will allow you to do that. MailChimp will do it as well. You can have content dripped out to your customers through your MailChimp stream as well. And most likely, membership sites are used as a way to make money. So in order to do that, you're going to have to collect payment for your memberships. What payment gateway will you use? PayPal, Stripe, manual payment with a check, whatever your options are. And if you're using PayPal, for example, PayPal has different levels. They have a standard level, which when someone uses that, they are exited from your site and they go to PayPal. You've probably seen that before. You exit the site, you put in your PayPal credentials, and then you're brought back to the site. Or PayPal has another level, PayPal Pro, where you actually don't need to leave the site, but you will need an SSL to do that because you're going to be collecting information on your website itself. Will you offer recurring payments, recurring memberships, and which will have recurring payments with them? And does your payment gateway support that? Is that something you need from a membership plugin? And then account access. Do you want your members to be able to log in, see their payments, change their credit card information, cancel their membership, or do you want them to have to contact you to do that? And coupons and discounts. Yeah.
What is SSL?
An SSL is a security certificate that you can add to your website that will encrypt information that's passed from your user to your website. So it's required when you're collecting payment or sensitive information. Most web hosts will offer that for you. A lot of them will give it to you for free. It's your first year. And from what I hear, it's going to be something that all websites are going to have one day as well. So it's something to learn about and think about.
It's also known as HTTPS.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, you know the little green lock that sometimes shows up at the top? That's what that is. And messaging, again, thinking this through. If you use the kind of flow chart that I showed you, thinking through what is the message that people get when they come to your website from various scenarios. Where are they redirected to after they log in? Are they going to have to search around to find the content, or is that going to be easy for you to link to from within the membership plugin? What kind of emails and confirmations and notifications come with the membership plugin? And then testing. Testing. I can't tell you how many times I will test a membership website, and yet still I will get a message from somebody who somehow found some way to get to some page where it didn't give them the message and they couldn't figure out how to log in. And I'll think, gosh, I know I set that all up properly, what's going on? And then I'll go try to duplicate it, and sure enough, I missed something. So how do you duplicate it? If you're logged into your website and you are an admin, you're not seeing what your normal user sees, even if they are a member and you're a member. So there are a couple of things that you can do. You can use in Chrome, there's a really easy way to open a new browser tab with incognito mode, which means it's basically a fresh browser without any login information already recorded, no cache, nothing's cached. Or you can use a different browser if you're using Firefox, test it in Chrome as a non-logged in user. Or if you have different membership levels, there's a plugin called user switching that works really well. It's easy for you to switch within your WordPress dashboard from one user to the next, so you can see what, say, a user who has membership level A will see and what a non-member will see. So those are some good things to do for testing. And then the last thing is, what other stuff do you need from a membership plugin? So there are a lot. We'll talk about that in a second. But do you need to have it interact with your CRM, which is your customer relationship management system? MailChimp or Constant Contact, a lot of times you would want that to be automatic. So when someone joins your membership, they're already fed into your customer management system. Do you need to have e-commerce? Are you going to be selling products? Then you need an e-commerce shopping cart type of platform. Will you offer an affiliate, which means if a member brings another member on, they get some kind of a kickback or a bonus. And then at a more advanced level, do you need multi-site, which means you're going to have multiple WordPress installs on your same account, and then and also what kind of interaction do you need to have between members? A forum like BB Press or Buddy Press, where you can really extend the capabilities of your membership website. How many of you are beginners? WordPress, would you say you're like a WordPress beginner? Okay. And how many of you are like high-level dev people? Okay, all right. So how many of you know Chris Lemma? Anybody heard of him? All right, so Chris Lemma blogs a lot about WordPress. He's a big name in the WordPress space, and he actually also writes a lot about membership plugins. He recently did a review of 30 of them, which I can't even imagine what that process would be like. But out of 30, only 4 of them, on a scale of 0 to 5, only 4 of them got a rating of 4 or above on Chris's criteria, which has ease of use, concurrent accounts, different things. Does that mean that 26 out of the 30 are not worth looking at? I don't think so. I think you still have to look at other reviews and look at what some plugins offer. As a matter of fact, one of the plugins I'm going to talk about, Chris did not give us a 4 to. He also is an affiliate for some membership plugins, and he may have different needs and be looking at different things than you are. But look him up and look up other reviews. I encourage you to do that. I'm going to talk about just three plugins that I've used for membership and the pros and cons of them, or just the pros of them. The first one is Paid Membership Pro. I do also on my website and on the slides, you can see this in more detail. I kind of compare what each one offers of the 3. So Paid Memberships Pro, I think is my favorite, even though it's not a top rated one according to Chris Lemma. And the reason why I like it is that it's great for a beginner WordPress user. It's all of the defaults make total sense. It has a ton of add-ons. It's very intuitive and easy to use. And it's extendable to a certain degree. I've used this a number of times. It has everything that you need in terms of payment gateways, connection with MailChimp and Constant Contact, and it makes a lot of sense. The documentation is good. iThemes is a package of all different kinds of plugins, really popular. Their e-commerce platform is Exchange, and they have an add-on that goes along with that, which is called Membership. Because it's an e-commerce platform, it treats membership as a product. So if you have e-commerce, if you have products that you want to sell, this would be a good fit for you. If you don't, it's maybe not the best fit, because it does treat your membership like a product, so it has images and descriptions that you probably don't need for some kind of basic membership type of stuff. I know WooCommerce also has something similar. I have not used that, but I think Chris gives it a good rating. And then MemberPress. This is Chris Lemma's 5-star, top-rated, very popular. MemberPress is it's very extendable. Developers seem to really like it. I recently used it on a very, very complex membership website, and I will say it worked fine, but I questioned throughout the process whether it was a mistake to have used it, because it is not intuitive. It is not easy. They have great support, and I did have a developer help me with some integration. So this was a multi-site, and it had Buddy Press, and it's a game that members pay to join. And then they play this lifestyle game where they can log points and they can talk to each other. So it's not a basic site at all, but it was missing a lot of basic things. And I did have a lot of glitches in testing where the kind of things I'm talking about with messaging were missing. Most notably, again, this gets under my skin, but if you try to go to the member area and you're not logged in and you're not a member, this join now is not there. So there's no way you could do that unless you know how to add a link, and you know where to find that within the plugin to add the link. So if you're comfortable with HTML, if you know how WordPress works, it's not that big of a deal. But the fact that you have to think about it and do it, I think brings this down a notch. So out of all the things I've talked about, the one thing that I hope you'll take away from this is that there are a lot of different membership plugins. They have something in common. They're all part of WordPress, and they all offer membership, but you're familiar with the Breakfast Club. It is a club. We are a club, the WordPress users. We have to make sure that we are thinking about what it's like to be a user, to be a member of something when we're trying to build it on the other end. Think through the process, really test it, and good luck. Thanks. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
One of the biggest problems in developing WordPress sites is the page load time, and often it's really dry down over time. What do you find in terms of any of these plugins or in your general experience? How do you keep the load time low? And do you find you have a lot of site down?
I haven't found that it has, but I haven't tested the load time of one versus the other. I don't think that it would. You could probably find somebody who has more server knowledge who could answer that better than I can, but it's still the same content. So once you're logged in, I think it would be really based more on your hosting, the type of hosting that you have, and how much load is being put on the site at the time. If you have 10,000 members, obviously that's going to slow the site down if they're all at the same time. Yeah.
Looking ahead to the time when a plugin might stop being adequately supported, do you look for portability right from the start, and how do you assess that?
It's a good question. She asked about thinking about plugins for the long term, their lifespan, right? Is that kind of what you're asking?
And portability.
Yeah, and portability. So a plugin is pretty portable. If you're thinking about changing themes or something, that's a reason to use a plugin. But that's one of the things that, in terms of the process, in terms of doing your research and looking at reviews of plugins when you're trying to find the ones that offer what you have and narrowing it down, is looking at what people have to say and looking at how many people are using it. Chances are the more people that are using it and the better reviews that it has, it's going to be around for a while. It's well supported. Yeah.
I was a volunteer webmaster for an association once, and it seemed to be constantly under attack. I mean, is that normal for an association? Is security always a problem for these sites?
Well, I don't know if that's specific to a membership site or or WordPress sites in general. Again, there will be some issues that you could take up with your hosting package to see if it's set up securely, what kind of security is on it. But there would be an issue with usernames and passwords and making sure that you have set up for user levels the appropriate security measures for secure passwords that WordPress now requires. Yeah.
Can I add to that just a bit?
Yeah, please.
So if that's a concern, like being attacked pretty regularly is a concern, it is WordPress alone runs 25% of the internet-ish. So it's very common that people will automate those types of attacks, and there are some security plugins that we can talk about later, anyone that's interested, that you would want to put in place whenever you're taking username and password data. You're gonna come under more attack just because there's more fields on the page. So
Anything else? Yeah.
Real quickly, could you say again how you do that user switching?
Yes, there's a plugin called user switching that.
It's called user.
Yeah.
And separate question on payment arrangements. Is it allowable, ethical, and okay to set up a till for bid arrangement, meaning you are a member paying until you say to stop?
Yeah, that would be, and that's part of the membership plugin. We'll give you options. If it offers recurring memberships, it will give you options as to how that works. If it's an indefinite period of time or if it's limited for a year or something like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
My understanding, just responding to this question, is that varies from state to state whether or not that's legal. I know it's not legal in California.
Even if you're saying up front of this.
Well, I mean, that's always changing.
Yeah, I'm not talking about tricking people.
Yeah, I know. When you say up front, like I got into this because I was on SurveyMonkey, and they automatically removed, when we weren't continuing with whatever it was, several $100s, and they automatically renewed it. And I So I looked up, it's just legal in California, it wasn't. And they did it very quickly.
Yeah, I don't know how I mean, maybe another developer can answer that, but I don't know how you could possibly control that. Because if you're setting up a website in Virginia or in California, the plugin is not set, the payment, it's not set based on where you are. So, I mean, the payment can be, I guess, PayPal will on it, but I don't know about that. I've never encountered that.
I'm not saying I have any idea
Yeah.
how to address it. I'm saying
That's a good
legally,
question.
if you have people sign.
Right.
And then can you say that you're going to automatically renew?
Right,
In many states, that's not legal. Because a year later, people don't remember.
right.
How that fits with what.
Yeah, that would be a good question for
Is it open
PayPal.
question?
Yeah.
That's why it's good to use PayPal on those types of things, because
They
you
know.
can control your renewals through PayPal if you forget your password. Through what was that? PayPal has the ability to cancel renewals.
As a user, you mean?
As a
Yes,
user.
as a member, you can log into PayPal and cancel it, right? But you also, one of the things I talked about was some membership plugins will allow them to have an account page on your site where they can do it without having to go to PayPal. So,
Yeah.
I used to use that like several years ago, but it wasn't that great. That's just one.
Is it it's a plugin or is it a third party?
It's a content management system for membership.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
All right, we're gonna take a 5-minute break while we get set up with our next presenter. We're gonna have setting up your first usability test in about 5 minutes. So if you'd like to grab another drink or another slice of pizza, this would be a good time to do that.
That was good.
All right.
Well done.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate it. Actually, I was talking to your comment.
By the way, my name is Tracy. I am also one of the co-organizers here at WordPress DC, and again, I remind you that if you are interested in speaking at a lightning talk next month, 5 minutes, about a topic related to the WordPress/web development world, and front-end development, could be WordPress, could be security, could be anything that's kind of in this arena, then please let one of us know. You can also post to the meetup.com mailing list, and there's a message board there, and you can get in touch with all of us, and we will be happy to slot you in. So I am having the honor of introducing my friend Anthony. Anthony Paul works at ID5, and he is a usability and user experience expert. He gave this presentation at WordCamp Lancaster. Was it the beginning of March, I think it was? Sometime in March, I think. And he's reprising it here. It's a great talk. And he will also be speaking next at WordCamp Asheville. That's in North Carolina on June 3rd through 5th on Atomic UX.
Atomic UI libraries.
Atomic UI libraries. I really kind of wish I could go. I'm gonna have to see if I can figure out how to go to WordCamp Asheville now. So without further ado, Mr. Anthony Paul.
Thank you. Yeah, so you did not accidentally end up in the Dutch countryside. I just didn't update this from the presentation I gave. I'm excited to share this talk. I piloted it at Lancaster, and it's really, I've been running usability tests for many years now, and there are a lot of different options when it comes to putting something you've built in front of users, and you get a lot of really great insights out of it. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Before we get into my slides, though, I'd like to show you a sample recording.
Task 13. Use the main menu icon in the upper right to browse back to the admissions information page. Did this menu behave as expected? Explain. No, this menu was confusing. This is super confusing right here. I have no idea what's going on with this menu. This is completely different than every other menu, every other time that I've clicked on that menu icon going through this test. This, to me, I realized that I completed the task successfully, but this to me is very confusing. I really hate it when sites do this, where the same icon does different things when you're on different pages, and it's like, this is just, this is overwhelming. This task was a 2. I basically just got lucky. I completed it, but the menu did not behave as expected.
All right, so that's one sample video. I have a couple more that if we have time at the end, I can play them for you. But that should be enough to give you the context of the type of information that we're looking for in a usability test. So why do we conduct usability tests? Before I answer that question, let's look at the term. A lot of times you'll hear user testing commonly thrown around, and I used to call all of this user testing until one of my mentors corrected me, because we build products, we put them in front of users, and ultimately we're measuring and evaluating the success of the tool that we've built. We're testing how usable it is to the end user. We're not testing the ability of the user to figure out how to use our tool. We're not ultimately changing our user. We're not swapping out our users for other users in most cases. But we are affecting the usability of our product. So something that we've built, a website or an application or a product or really anything, even a logo or a brand idea that we're putting in front of somebody, we're testing the usability of what we've created. We're doing that because if somebody doesn't know how to use what we've built and they smash our door, if we didn't have a sign there or anything that clearly communicates how that door opens and closes, we're not charging that person to fix the door. Fixing the door is on us. I feel really bad for this guy. So back to why do we test? We test for a lot of things. If you are a practitioner in this arena, we test because it's general best practice to have a user focus. Ideally, we're building something that people want to use, something they enjoy to use, or minimally they are motivated to use it when they need to use it. We do it to validate client assumptions. So we go into our project requirements meetings early in a project, and our clients will tell us a lot of different things about the users, or even if we're building things for ourselves, we lean on what we already know about people in general. We're leaning on a lot of stereotypes, and we're trying to minimize those stereotypes through usability testing and objectively figure out, does somebody know how to use this thing? Does this icon make sense? Does an idea transfer across languages, across cultures, across social contexts? We do it to inform our design decisions, to debate our clients. So when we make a recommendation, we use our usability test as a means of leaning on why we made the decision. So instead of the conversation being, I don't like this color, or I don't like this thing, and using that like word that is very subjective, we can objectively say, well, we made this decision because of this thing that we learned. We do it to show success over time. Ideally, you're running usability tests at multiple points throughout a project. One of the things I'll get to later on that was shown in that video is there was a measurement there at the end that contributes to a larger average system usability score that allows you throughout the life of a project to hopefully see that the usability of your product has been improving if you're running the same usability test on different versions of a prototype. And then lastly, to grow as a practitioner. There are many things that you will learn in a usability test that are not confined to that usability test that you're running. You'll learn why the hamburger menu doesn't make sense. When you watch somebody not find to that icon and you're just painfully observing this video for a long time, you learn that next time maybe you won't use that icon. But I'm not a researcher. Where do I start? And that's why we're here today. I was introduced. I'm director of UX up in Baltimore. I've been doing this for many years, but I also understand where people are who don't do it, because when I started my career over a decade ago, I didn't do usability testing. Everything was, does my grandmother like it? Does Charlie like it? And I didn't actually put things in front of actual users. So I transitioned into that. So how do I get into usability testing? Well, to run a usability test, you need a few components, you need a few ingredients. Ultimately, to run a usability test, the first thing you need is a project goal. Hopefully you had a project goal before you decided to embark on building a website or rebuilding a website. You weren't just building it for just to build it, but you actually had a goal in mind. So from a business perspective, I have a goal of attracting more customers, or I have a new brand and I want people to become familiar with that brand. I want to compete in a competitive space. These are all goals that you will have for a project you're going into. You need a test strategy. You'll get that from your goal and some of the other things that we'll talk about. But ultimately, you need some kind of research goal, something that you hope to learn in the test, and you want to go ahead and define that. You'll need the prototype itself, even if that is today's live site, or at the end of the project it's a beta that you want to test against. All kinds of fidelities throughout the life of a project. Some of them can even be abstract. It could just be a menu system and not a paginated system. But you need the thing that you're testing against. You need some kind of test facility. It doesn't have to be a physical space. It could be an online screen sharing system. It could be an online automated demographic selection system that fulfills orders for you. That's what that video I showed was from. But you need some kind of hardware, software blend to go ahead and capture the information for you to analyze. And then lastly, of course, you need those participants. And I put the note here, demographics if relevant, because my personal preference is actually not to demographically select. To intentionally select for a diverse audience. So to say, I want a certain number of women, a certain number of men, a certain number of ages, a certain number of this and that. But ideally, your usability test is across a blend of social contexts of some kind. Because usability is all about understanding information. And unless you have a very hyper-specific audience, I recommend against saying, all right, I'm only going to test with 20-year-olds, 20-year-old males who are white and like video games. Project goals. Why are we even working on this project? Goals come in all shapes and sizes, and they come in all kinds of perspectives and tangibilities. So for an example like a university, their goal for going into a website design or redesign might be they want their prospective students to easily find degree info. That's important to their business. Something like an online store might have something more specific. They want to reduce shopping cart friction. So I might go into a project redesign, into a sprint cycle, into a usability test, wanting to figure out how to make the checkout process fine-tuned to get just that many more customers clicking that buy button and completing through the payment process. A nonprofit might want to drive donations. So all of these have different motivations. The university example here, that sounds like an information architecture problem. It's about organizing content. This touches on everything. The e-store, it touches on having pages refresh quickly, having the content be very clear, which buttons you click on, all of the help messaging that goes along with that. And then the driving donations could just be making sure you're exuding your value statements, telling the story that compels somebody to give their money. Goals shouldn't be prescriptive. So a good example of a goal here is that one I just gave: allow visitors to quickly find specific degree programs of interest. That one tells me what the business goal is. The second example, the bad example, is list all degree options on the homepage. That's not a project goal, that is a design decision. And it's okay to have multiple goals. So back to that university example, I have a few here. We want to communicate the school brand, how it is to attend this university. We want to allow prospects to quickly find that program of interest. That's our goal again. And we want to drive prospects toward contacting the school. So we want to provide that call to action that gets them to schedule an appointment or to apply online. So how do we develop a test strategy from that? And this is really about figuring out what tests we should run at what point in a project. There are a lot of different types of usability tests, as we mentioned. Some of them are qualitative, some are quantitative. So some of them you might not get really anecdotal feedback, but you're polling across many, many people. And so you're getting a statistical data set that doesn't really tell a story, but you have to analyze it. And then otherwise you might go for the qualitative data, where the example I have, I hear somebody talking, I get really detailed information, but I can't really do that quantitatively because I would not live through watching 1,500 of those videos. And there's also diminishing return and all of that you have to factor in. So what type of test should we run? And to arrive at what type of test and what we want to get out of it, it's really this not very mathematical, something I framed as an equation here. But I need to understand my project constraints. I need to know, well, what is the timeline I'm working within? How much budget do I have? Are there any constraints on what types of prototypes I have at my disposal? How many users do I have in my pocket? Who do I have access to? Et cetera, et cetera. And those project constraints are going to impose some rules on what I even have to choose from. And then I want to compare that against my hairiest problems. So back in the example where I compared the university, the e-store, et cetera, each of those had very different problems. You have one that's very much an information organization problem. If our problem is nobody can find anything, we have a ton of content, a ton of pages, our menus are very complex, and that's the problem that we're trying to resolve. I know that that's one of our hairiest problems, where another business is going to have a completely different hairiest problem. So if I put my constraints and my hairiest problems together, ultimately what I'm trying to arrive at is choosing a test and a number of tests that give me that maximum benefit. So let's look at some examples here. Some of the questions that I might ask to get to my constraints. What is our test budget? How many sets of tests can we run? So do we have budget for only one test, or can we do it multiple times throughout a project? Because if we only have one, we have to be very strategic about where we put it in our project lifecycle. Who's in charge of recruitment? This is one that's burned me a few times because in the proposal phase and in the scope definition, you go through these conversations and everyone says, yeah, we want usability testing. And then we get to the deadline where we're ready to do usability testing. It's like, all right, so you have your users, and you have them lined up. Oh no, we don't actually have any users that we can schedule time with. So then we have to figure out how to get those people. So ask who's in charge of recruitment. Do we have demographic requirements? I mentioned it's best to avoid that, but sometimes there are demographic requirements for something, and there are some legal demographic requirements too for things like this. You know, minors, I'm sure there are all kinds of different legal loopholes that you have to go through depending on what type of test you're running. And then are the participants local? That'll also contribute to some of the decisions that you're making when you're setting up your test. So Harris problems. Harris problems helps you figure out when in a project to test. So back to saying, okay, if I only have one test that I could do, if my problem is too much content, that's an information architecture problem. It's me figuring out the categories that everything fits into. I can test that in an abstract manner. I can do things like card sorts. I can set up a tree jack test that has essentially a complex accordion system that allows people to drill down and try and find that content in the test. And I can solve that problem early on an early prototype to make sure that as I go into the rest of my project, I know the information architecture is correct. So if I do a usability test later on and somebody can't find anything, that's through process of elimination, it tells me something else might be wrong. It might be design, it might be something else. Brand perception is important. This is at the opposite end of this. Donations for I want to test later in the project when I have some of my videography work, when I have a lot of my copywriting done, when I've chosen my colors and my fonts and everything that really pulls you into the emotional story of that design. If I tested the IA up front, that wouldn't give me anything to solve that Harris problem. So testing options, lots of options for something like a usability test that I have to think about. Moderated versus unmoderated is, am I sitting with the person and am I taking notes and am I giving them prompts, tasks for each of the tasks that I put together? Unmoderated, on the other hand, allows me to load that script into an automated system and the user gets to interact with the automated system. The video I played is an unmoderated system, so I put all my tasks in. They are instructed to verbalize throughout. Inherent benefits and costs and benefits for both. Moderated, in really quick, moderated to me imposes a lot more biases because you have a lot of psychological biases where somebody is trying to please you as a tester and they're trying to tell you how great they love that thing is that you've built, and so they tend to be less negative. And there are lots of other biases that you can read about on Wikipedia that are fascinating. However, moderated has a benefit of, if you're a really good and seasoned tester, you can read between the lines on a lot of stuff. And if somebody's spending too much time on a task that they're failing at, you can move them on to the next task quicker. Or if somebody's a rock star and they're just blowing through these tasks, you can ask improvised questions in between. And you can say, what do you expect to happen there? And is there a way that this could be improved to fit your needs? And so you could get a lot more information out of that set time that you have scheduled with this person. Unmoderated reduces those biases, but it's a very controlled testing environment. In-person versus remote. Some of this really relies on, first, are your users even local? If they're not, you're probably doing remote, unless you plan on traveling the world. But the example that I'm getting into with a lot of these is the lowest budget approach for getting started. So in person, I tend to, even if my tests are local, I actually prefer remote, again, to minimize biases, because if you're doing an in-person test, most likely you're having that person come into a lab environment with flickering neon lights and you're breathing on their neck and somebody farts or something. And it's just an awkward, impersonal situation. You're probably having them use a device that they're unfamiliar with. Where remote, you're not seeing each other's faces, you're hearing voices, and you're sharing your screen for the test, and you can still record and everything. But somebody can do it from the comfort of their home if they want to. And then ultimately, desktop versus mobile. Ideally, you're testing both of those. This is going to depend on what you're testing and what type of project. Ideally, you're testing both. Mobile is a little harder to do remote unless you're using a system that has a means of recording remote. That's easier to do in person with a combination of a screen recorder and also a camera of some sort that's recording gestures, particularly for touch devices. But with desktop, remote is my preference for desktop. So an example time, let's go back to the university. We've talked about it a couple of times here. So for example, our constraints after we asked a few of those questions might be, well, we only have budget and time for one test, and we want to do the industry recommended 8 to 12 participants, because anything above that, you start to see diminishing return, and you're just wasting hours watching videos, seeing the same mistakes over and over again. So you don't see a lot of significant things after 12. So usually I'll shoot for ideally 12, but 10, 8 is plenty. The participants are not local, I know that, for my audience, because we're attracting prospects from all over the place. So that's a constraint I understand. And so we want to go ahead and do automated recruitment because we don't have anyone at our disposal. Maybe we have a mailing list that we can blast this out to, but really somebody is going to be logging in and doing this test on their own time. I know that my hairiest problems are too much content and things are hard to find. So I know, again, that's probably an information architecture problem. But because I'm at university, I had those 3 problems that I wanted to test against. So even though this is my hairiest problem, I might still push it a little later in the project to also start validating some of the design decisions as well, because I only have 1 test. Now, if I had multiple tests, I would probably do information architecture independently up front. Because of my constraints, I know I want to use an online system. It's going to be unmoderated. So I'm planning on putting my script together with all of my tasks, loading it into something, and then ordering that number of users. The hairiest problems, I know, as I mentioned, I need to test early in the prototype because I want to validate my IA decisions before I've gotten too far into building this thing, because I don't want to have to back out all of that design and development work. But perhaps I'll go further than just a menu system. I'll get into some wireframes. So my decision is to run an unmoderated remote test. I choose a system like TryMyUI. This is an example that video came out of. It's similar to usertesting.com. Usertesting.com is kind of the household name in the industry, but their pay model is really structured for the Facebook or some kind of enterprise organization, because it's all based on a contract model that you set up for the year based on a volume of tests. If you're an independent developer or designer, or even a design agency where you sell these services on a project-by-project basis, their pay model doesn't really work, because you get on the phone with them, they're talking about thousands of tests, and you don't know how many you'll need to run in a year. So I use TryMyUI. It's an a la carte system. I don't work for them or anything. There are many. This is one that I found on one of those top 10 blog lists once. It's $35 a video. You get a 20-minute video, and then you also get all of the spreadsheet of data that people answered certain questions and things like that. And it handles the recruitment. It gives you that recording. I want to run the test early on early designs or wireframes, and that means that I still need that live URL for somebody to interact with, so I need something like Envision. And if you haven't used Envision before, this is basically what the administrative interface looks like. So I have my sketch files, my Photoshop files. I can even have drawings that I've taken a photo of, or some wireframes. I have representations of all of the menus and pages, and I drag all of those into Envision. It's a web-based system. It gives me a shareable URL. And then these blue boxes are in the administrative pane. I can draw rectangles around things that are fake buttons, and then I say which image do I link to if somebody clicks on in that area of the screenshot. From the participant view, they don't see those blue boxes. They just see your design. Again, if I click on any of these, it goes to a different screenshot. And so it does this really cool interaction between a medley of non-interactive files natively. It even has overlays, so I could build out this complex menu. These were each hotspots. It didn't give me the sliding motion, but it would advance to another part of that menu, and it had a nice overlay system. So to get to that test script, we want to understand, take those project goals, and we need to translate them into tasks. So what are we actually asking people to do in our interface to get to this right data? So if our goal here was to allow those prospective students to quickly find programs of interest, then we need a research question. Just put a question mark on that. Are prospective students able to find programs of interest? That's our research question, and we'll have several of those. Some goals might actually have multiple research questions, and you might have multiple goals that translate into one research question. But assemble all those research questions, and then translate each of those research questions into at least one task, if not a couple of tasks. So I will tell the user, return to the home page, use the program finder to find information about a degree in physics. So I give them a very specific task that they can verbalize what their thoughts are as they're walking through that task. And I see all of the points of confusion that go back to this goal of, are people able to find our programs of interest? So when I assemble that script, it'll start to look something like this, and I will probably have 10 or 12 tasks. You don't want an asinine number of tasks, but you'll weave together all those multiple goals, all of the tasks that you derive from those goals, and you want to test against as much of that as possible. And find preferences first, then test tools. So that example task I gave you that said, go to the program finder and do X, Y, Z. That's actually not a good question to start with. It's not a good task to start with because you are helping the user in the discovery of that tool. What you would actually want to start with is a task like, you're interested in learning more about a degree program in physics. You know, the whole Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're interested in that. And so you want to let them explore and try and find that content to see where they look first. Then later on in the test, that's why I had it as go back to the home page and use this specific tool. Because I wanted to make sure at some point in the test they were using the main menu, at some point in the test they were using the program finder. And then that's fun because later on you might find that their preference changes. So if you introduce an open-ended again later on in the test, you might find that they use the program finder that they liked better than using something else on the page after they discovered it. Pilot test with a friend. All of these tests are generally going to be time-based. So whether you're ordering an online system or you have a scheduled time slot with a person, you want to make sure your tasks are not taking entirely too long. You're going to change your test a lot. So just grab somebody in your office or somebody who's unfamiliar with the project, run through the test with them. Don't answer any of their questions. That's when somebody asks you a question in a test, if you're moderating a test, you always answer with a question. So they might say, well, where is the X, Y, and Z? And you say, well, where do you think it should be? And then they verbalize where they think it should be, and you get a lot of good data. So do that in your pilot test, and then you can figure out how you need to structure your test. So set up with web applications. This is what Try My UI looks like. So the order screen, I start by putting in the title of my test. I give an upfront scenario, and that upfront scenario says, today you are browsing a university website as a prospective student, and you are considering different schools and thinking about a degree in physics. By giving somebody that context, it allows them to do just enough role playing to still use their typical usability faculties throughout the rest of the test. And then you put in all of your tasks, each are on a unique line. You have a couple options in here. At the end of this system and most online systems, it'll end giving the user a few different questions, like what did you feel was the hardest thing to do on this site? What would you change? You can customize the questions if you would like to. And then they're calling it a single ease question, but it's actually SUS is the acronym if you want to read about that on Wikipedia, the system usability score. And that was where at the end of the task, there was a scale of 1 to 7, and it says, on a scale of 1 to 7, how easy did you feel this task was to perform? And they mark that. And that gives you a lot of really fascinating information, because when they mark that, and they mark whether they believe they completed this task or not, that's also something they opt into with that information. When you watch that video and you look at the results that were provided, you're going to find some anomalies there where people thought they completed a task and they actually didn't, or people who did complete the task and they didn't realize they completed it. And so that's all valuable feedback as well. And so this will show you the average of a lot of different things. Which tasks were the hardest in the test for all of your users as a conglomerate or individually, which tasks took the most time versus the least time for them to complete, and then what was their self-analysis of how easy a specific task was. How do you evaluate this? This looks complex, but it's really not. I just created an Excel spreadsheet. Each of these columns aligns with I didn't want to put in the user's name or anything because I didn't want to remember them specifically, but I put in whether they were male or female, what was their age range, their user number. So I have a couple of columns for that. And then I have each of the tasks numbered. What was their self-analysis of how easy they thought something was? And then all of these are highlighted because I actually corrected them. So I say, whether they did or did not complete that task, I say, all right, well, they say they completed it, but actually they didn't complete it. And then I have all the answers. This stuff I didn't have to type up. This was information they provided through the survey in these last few columns. So each row is one specific test. And as I watch that test video, I'm just taking notes on interesting things I observed while they are verbalizing. What are the things they had the hardest time with? Were there any confusion points? Did they validate anything? Is there anything that I had a hypothesis wouldn't work and they figured it out? Because then I can do a summary row at the bottom and I can read up a column and say, oh, well, here are the themes. Here are things that everyone's struggling with. And that tells me where big problem areas are versus something only one person had a problem with. And then I did a couple of different scores at the bottom. One that was an average of usability scores across all users for that task. The other was an average of usability scores only for the people who completed the task, because if they failed at the task, they were always going to give it a low score. And I wanted to see among completions what was the average. This is a detail of what that spreadsheet looks like. So task 3, reviewing the home page, my notes. Task 4, going to undergraduate admissions, learning about the application process. Here are some of the things that I heard. And then those are the 2 scores that I talked about at the bottom. I also marked, some people didn't respond to some stuff, but this is all verbatim answers to the quiz questions at the end. So in closing, I'll ask the question again, why do we conduct usability tests? And again, this is one of those things where when you first go into usability testing, you are going to regret it. You're gonna start getting all this feedback and wonder why you're torturing yourself with all of this. It's all going to sound very negative. Your inner designer is going to become offended when somebody is talking badly about your creative ideas. But if you can get over all of that, if you can really latch on to this being constructive criticism to help whatever you're building be better, ultimately you'll understand that the price of light is less than the cost of darkness. So it's much cheaper, and ultimately your product and everything you build will be much more fulfilling. That said, as I mentioned, the first time you run a usability test, you're going to feel like you're watching this. You're going to be like, it's a glass of water. How do you not understand how to use this? But if you learn from this and realize maybe there needs to be a hole in the corner to drink from, maybe you'll come up with a superior drinking glass. So I am Anthony Paul. I have a link here to Envision app and Try My UI, the two products that I mentioned for that specific test that I showed. You can find me online and archives of my talks, including these slides, at adp.rocks, or I have a couple emoji domains, thundersnow.ws or pizzarat.ws. Only certain browsers will open those. And then on Twitter, anthonydpaul. Thank you. I'll take 2 questions and then we will socialize and I'll stick around for a little bit.
Okay, you had mentioned too much content.
Yep.
And then you talked about card sorts and tree jacks.
Uh-huh.
It's sort of a 2-part question. One, I don't know what either one of those terms mean, but how do you say to your client, the one that has way too much content, that they have way too much content and you'd like to do a user testing on it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then bring in card sorts and tree jacks.
Okay. Great question. Very complex question.
Yes, I'm sorry.
So how do you get your client to understand they have too much content? Usually they know that. They're usually undergoing this process because people are always complaining about them having too much content or it's hard to find. So usually they are aware of that problem, but because of political pressures and this and that, all of that content needs to remain. That's particularly the case with higher ed universities. You have some department that has to have their content there, even though analytics say that nobody looks at it. That said, the other 2 things, you asked about card sorting and tree jacks. Card sorting is an exercise that typically you do tactically, so or tactilely, with sticky notes or index cards, and you take representative content of everything in the site, so all the labels. We have news articles, we have events, we have bios, we have this, we have that, and you write all of those on a piece of paper, and then as a group, or with individual users, or with different stakeholders, you have people sort them into piles of things that they feel are related. So you give it to them as a mess that they then have to categorize. You take a photo of that. You do that multiple times with different groups, and you start to see patterns between the groupings and where some things might need to be cross-linked somewhere else because some users will look for them there and some will look for them here. But usually you'll start to see patterns of buckets. There are digital tools for that. I don't have a name of one off the top of my head, but there are some. Optimal sort is one online where you can load in all that content. And you can even opt to allow users to write their own cards if they feel something is missing for a certain type of site. And then a tree jack test, if you use a bot or something else to create an outline of the navigation structure of a website, you can get an inventory of all the pages that exist. Or you can take the results of your card sort and you've designed some new information architecture system, some menu navigation where everything's nested in different levels. You go through the same process of assembling your tasks. So your task might be find information on a degree program in physics. And you have this accordion set up where the whole menu is collapsed and all it is an accordion of menus. And it gives you a screen recording where you say, find degree info on program in physics. And somebody clicks on the top level menu item they think is it, that accordion opens. You see in the video, they're either wrong or they're right, or they keep drilling down. And then once they get to a page where they feel that content exists, there aren't any pages, it's only the menu system. But in that test, they check a box next to something that says, I think this is where this content lives. That's a really good way of validating labels for a complex navigation system. I think I answered both of your questions. One more question.
Do you have any experience working with sites
where you have a user base that's accustomed to finding stuff in a certain way, but it only works for the people who already know the site, and you kind of want to
Yes.
away from that.
Yep, so to repeat the question, have I worked with clients where you have a subset of people, usually they're powerful people in some way, or very loud, one of the two, who they are used to having something somewhere and it needs to be there. That's where I'll go back to the reasons for user testing, or usability testing, where you run your usability tests, you find that new employees and other people are unable to find this thing, or new users or other users are unable to find this thing, and map that back to a business goal of attracting prospective students. And suddenly you have fodder to at least debate with. Now, something might have to redundantly live in two places, or you might have to figure out a design way of accomplishing both of those things and listening to that voice. But at least you have a means of talking about that problem, where if you had not run usability tests, you would just say, okay, it lives there. And then later on, that project, you're gonna launch the site, it's gonna fail because it won't have accomplished any of those business goals, and you'll be blamed for that, where as long as that decision is theirs, it also mitigates that blame being perceived as you. All right, thank you.
All right, that is it for time.